Hi, I'm Greg Thomas from Workday, and welcome to another Workday Social Chat. Today we're here talking about mental health in the workplace and the stigma that surrounds it. I'm joined by some of my colleagues who are going to help us understand this important issue, and thank you for helping us understand. So why don't we start with introductions of our panel?
My name is Zach Zucker. I work on the performance methodology team in the Global Services Enablement group here at Workday.
I'm Tatiana, and I'm on the services operations team here at Workday.
Hi, my name is Adam Lewis. I work on the HCM Global Person team as an application developer here at Workday.
Hi, I'm Hannah Pryor, and I am an associate deployment consultant on the student product.
Hi, my name is Denise Hensley, and I'm on the Treasury Operations team here at Workday.
Hi, I'm Yasmin El-Sherbini, and I'm the Wellbeing Program Manager here at Workday.
Thanks to you all for being here. So Yasmin, why don't we start with you? Really simply, why is this topic so important to talk about?
I think it's important to talk about for a few reasons. I think it's important to create awareness around how prevalent mental health conditions actually are. So in America, 1 in 5 people will experience a mental health condition in their life. And I think it's an important topic to talk about because of the stigma around mental health. Stigma creates an environment of fear and silence and shame. And on average, the delay for intervention is 8 to 10 years because of stigma. So I think it's important because as a society, we typically are more comfortable talking about physical disease. We are more comfortable sharing that we have diabetes or cancer or heart disease, but society is less likely to do so for mental health conditions. So it's important that we create an open dialogue to reduce stigma.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. I mean, that's a pretty shocking statistic of both how long it takes and how many people suffer from this. So maybe for the rest of the panelists, starting with you, Zach, what's your perspective? What made you want to be part of this and talk about this today?
For me, I mean, I've suffered with anxiety and body dysmorphia for a better part of my life, and just being able to kind of have a voice and help other people that could be in that same situation as Yasmin said, it takes 8 to 10 years before there is some sort of intervention, and it's about really knocking down those stigmas around it. And I really want to be able to again have that voice, help people know that it's okay to reach out, get help, and you feel better about yourself.
Yeah. Anyone else in terms of why it's important for you to be part of this conversation like to chime in?
Sure. I too have dealt with both anxiety and depression for probably the better part of the decade that was diagnosed, and probably much longer without diagnosis. And for me, the other thing that really made me want to participate is that part of my belief system is that my best self is my bravest and boldest self. And if I'm being honest, I have a bit of anxiety now participating in this because I haven't really told anyone here about the fact that I have anxiety and depression. And so I think by taking that scary step and talking about it lets other people know that this is a place where they can do that too. And hopefully through our experiences and our stories, they'll be encouraged to either seek help or share their stories with someone else.
Yeah, I think that's well said. It takes both a lot of courage, but also that sense maybe that it's just me, right? Knowing that other people are suffering from things, it's a different, changes the game a bit. Adam?
Yeah, I think for me, for one, I also have depression and some anxiety, and that's been going on for a while. And one thing for me is that a lot of people close to me, friends and loved ones, also suffer from a variety of different mental illnesses, depression, anxiety, bipolar, schizophrenia. I know people with all of these, and I see how it affects their lives. And, as Yasmin was saying earlier, mental health, mental illness isn't a thing that we really talk about in society. So it's important to me to speak up about these kinds of topics because otherwise they're not going to get spoken about.
For me personally, that it's a lot about understanding. So if you're not someone who is experiencing these things, I still think it's very important to be able to identify and understand what others are going through. And that goes for both at home and also in the workplace. And so I think that there just needs to be a lot more awareness and making it so that mental illnesses or mental health problems aren't unconventional.
For those of you who have experienced some kind of mental health condition, like how would you describe what that's like, not necessarily the specifics of the condition, but this notion that maybe I'm alone and I'm struggling with it, whatever you'd say in your own words. For someone, what would you say to someone who hasn't experienced that? And Hannah, maybe we'll start with you.
I have struggled with depression, anxiety, as well as an eating disorder for about 11 years. Fortunately, I'm recovered from the eating disorder, so that's no longer an issue, but depression, anxiety is still something that I deal with on a daily basis. For me, it kind of feels like it's this thing that drastically impacts my everyday life, but kind of like what we've been talking about, it doesn't feel like it's something that I can still go forward to not even all of my friends or family and say, hey, this is something that I'm struggling with. So it's kind of just like this silent struggle that I think that I deal with all the time. I'm really grateful that Workday is willing to discuss it, because I think that the more that we have these sort of discussions, the less that people like me who struggle are going to feel like we can't come forward and talk about it and say, hey, look, this is what I'm dealing with at this point in my might need to take a beat now and again to get my footing.
Yeah, and I think what was shared earlier about the difference between both the acceptance level of physical ailments versus mental ones is interesting, but also, if I'm missing a limb, that's probably going to be pretty apparent to people from the outside, right? There are, of course, physical conditions that are not. My youngest daughter has type 1 diabetes, and, it's not obvious unless you happen to see she's got this thing hanging off her with tubing and whatnot. But a mental condition is not going to be visible in that way. So I think that's a really important call out. Zach, what would you add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's there are difficulties with kind of dealing with this, and I mean, it becomes difficult to explain sometimes, to people when you get to work and you spend 40 minutes in your car because you can't face the day. That's kind of that silent aspect of it. I mean, I've been lucky enough to have like a fantastic manager here that I've been able to talk to about it and understands and supports me in whatever I need to do to kind of make things better. But sometimes it's just you have to find people to talk to, and it's not always that easy because you get this feeling that they have no idea how I'm feeling. Who do I talk to at that point? It's like, again, you're spending 40 minutes in your car. You can't really go into the office and be like, why you're late. The kids were, causing trouble this morning and had to, get them to school. No, I was sitting in my car for 40 minutes because I couldn't face the day. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, and that's kind of, those are those hard parts about it that it's hard to explain.
Yeah, you touched on the who, having someone to talk to, but also the how, like literally, like how do I go through this to be able to even reach out for help, right? Please.
One of the things that's really interesting and challenging for me, the way that I experience my mental illness is like my brain is training for an Ironman and never stops. What makes it challenging is that the very things that make it difficult for me to function at times are also the things that make me really good at my job. And so for me, my personal and professional challenge is not only finding balance, protecting my time, but also making sure that like I set up my day in a way, I'm meticulous about it in a way that means that I can function.
Thank you both for sharing. So I know some of you on the panel have had experience sort of in a more of a support role, supporting mental health concerns. Maybe Denise, starting with you, what's one of the lessons that you've learned in those trainings and in your previous roles to help you provide that support and that help for people?
Yeah, I think when it comes to mental illness or mental well-being, a lot of people are scared to not be the professional. And that's true. Like, you shouldn't be giving advice to people when you don't have the expertise. I took a mental health first aid class, as well as, being CPR certified. And I think that experience allowed me to understand more of like kind of identifying the signs, but also creating understanding. When you know how to identify whether someone is going through a hardship or a mental health illness, it kind of allows you to sympathize, empathize, and also understand their point of view better. And you also can't just ask them, like, oh, are you experiencing like a mental health difficulty? It's kind of something that requires a lot of trust. So I think that as a person who's able to identify going through that training has been very helpful for me to communicate with my peers, my managers, as well as other people that I work with, because it creates this understanding of like, I know that you might not be doing well. What are the ways that I can provide support? until like maybe a professional can come and help, or a way to encourage my peers to actually go reach out for help. Because I know that that's like the struggle there, is having the conversation and not having the follow-up. But the follow-up is very important because you're not an expert. You know, you're someone who can get them help when needed.
Yeah. I mean, I think the first aid analogy is pretty apt, right? Let me help you, and then, the professionals can help. Adam, Tatiana, would you like to chime in?
So back in college, I helped institute at my college. I helped found the campus NAMI chapter and was involved in that a little bit. And one of my main projects that I personally worked on was a suicide prevention and awareness workshop. And one of the main ideas of that was, well, there were two main ideas to that. One was giving a platform for people to share their experiences, because that's very important. If people can't talk about it, then nobody's going to know. And the other part of that was educating people. Educating people, here's how you can help somebody. Even if you're not a professional, here are the ways where you can intervene. And I think that providing an education of that sort to everybody, since it's not something you don't take a class in elementary school to learn, here's how to talk about mental illness. When more people know about it, there can be more support just all around.
Yeah, knowledge is power, for sure.
So in my experience as an advocate and a support person, it was around a very particular kind of trauma. So I volunteered for 4 years as a crisis counselor for a sexual assault hotline. And what that involved was talking to people on the phone who are in some stage of crisis. And probably one of the hardest lessons I learned during that time was that people cope the best way they can. And my role as an advocate, my job was not to tell them that they should choose to do something else or to offer suggestions based on what I considered healthy behavior, but to listen and to affirm that they were doing something in that moment that made them feel okay or helped them move to the next moment. Now, as a person who might have a friend or whatever who's going through that sort of thing, the best thing you can do is be non-judgmental and someone that they can listen to. Because if you break down that barrier of feeling like they're going to be judged for whatever they're going through, then they are more likely to seek out your help when they're having those tough moments.
So, I think a lot of you have already touched on this in some way, but there are a lot of stereotypes and misconceptions around mental health, what it means to have a mental health condition, the ways in which you might sort of deal with it and seek the support or comfort that you need. When you think about those, where do you think, what bothers you the most, or what misconceptions do you see that you'd really like to help kind of dispel?
I think that's an excellent question. And one that I have noticed is that there seems to be an insidious idea in our society, very widespread, that mental illness is something that is not really real. And let me explain what I mean by that. There's this belief that mental illness, depression, anxiety, everything, is something that you can will yourself through.
Get over it.
Yeah. And if you can't will yourself through it, then you're just not strong enough inside. Literally yesterday, I was talking to somebody about how things are difficult for me right now, and their response was, I can feel depressed too sometimes, it's just a feeling, I get over it, other people have it worse. And I think to me that shows a fundamental misunderstanding of what mental illness is. You can't will yourself out of, depression or anxiety as, you could will yourself out of diabetes, And I think the idea is so widespread that, at least speaking for myself, like as a sufferer of mental illness, I start to believe it as well. I think it harms people with mental illness in two ways. In one, there's nobody to talk to, like you were saying earlier, Zach. Like, people wouldn't understand what's such a big deal about it. Now, on the other hand, when it gets to a point where we believe it ourselves, it leads to, I think, more self-destructive behavior, thinking, why can't I be better at this? Why, just all sorts of why, when there's an answer that it does exist, that it is a disease, that just people don't, as a society, fully believe right now, I think.
And so to kind of add on to that, not something that you can see on the outside. And so one stigma that I get a lot is, oh, like you have depression, anxiety, but you're so bubbly, you're so happy. How can you possibly have that? Like your life is so great. And again, it's like you said, it's a fundamental misunderstanding of any mental illness. And so for me, that was extremely detrimental because, there was the stigma of talking about it with people. And for me, it got to the point where I almost took my life because I did not feel like I could talk about it with anybody, specifically the suicidal feelings that I was having at that point. Because, if I went to somebody and said that that was what I was going through, then they were going to say, oh, well, like, you can't be, you're happy, you're bubbly, you're a cheerleader. Like, there's no way that you can be going through that. Unfortunately, I was not successful in ending my life. But, if we can open the conversation more and talk about these stigmas and help them go away, then people can come forward earlier and sooner than, the moment where they're, about to take their own life.
Yeah, I think, thank you all for being so open and courageous in your shares. And I think, again, by analogy with a physical condition, it's hard to imagine someone telling someone who's missing a leg to say, well, just try harder to run that marathon, right? It's not necessarily possible or not possible in the way that someone who's able-limbed might think it is. And I think these points about helping people to understand what it might look like from the inside are really, really important. Does anyone else want to kind of chime in on some of the misconceptions or stereotypes?
It's, especially in the workplace, it's difficult talking about the social, political environment that may contribute to mental wellness or the lack thereof. And especially being a person of color, there's a lot that I experience outside of work, and it comes to work with me, whether you realize it or not, but I can't talk about it at work because either it gets derailed by a conversation of politics, or someone's telling me that it's really not that big of a deal and they just don't get it. And it's just like, well, the fact that this thing happened outside means that I can't be a culture ambassador today, right? I can't be a Workday hero today. I'm angry and I'm distracted and I'm having difficulty focusing. And that has a very real impact on my ability to do my best work.
With those stereotypes and kind of misconceptions in mind, what piece of advice might you have for others, maybe either to share their own personal story if they haven't gotten to that point, or in a more of a support role? Yasmin, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, I think in terms of creating an environment in the workplace to support your employees, one of the things that employers should look for is what is the current state of the environment? What is the current state of our culture? Do we offer the appropriate resources for our employees? So with that in mind, making sure that you do have an environment that is conducive, that is supportive, that does allow for open dialogue, and that also is going to allow your employees to talk about it. I think it's also important in that regard to make sure that senior leadership is involved, so your organization does demonstrate what a commitment you are making to the cause, whether it's creating resource groups and peer groups that we have here at Workday through our employee belonging councils that span across different affinity groups for different cultures and different community groups. And lastly, I think from a support role in the employer environment, I think it's important to also assess the resources that are available to your employees. So make sure that the resources and benefits that you have are available, they are appropriate for their specific needs, but not only that, your employees know how to access them, where to access them, and why it's beneficial, and that it's okay to access them. So it's not enough to simply offer them, but make sure you have campaigns around, this is why it's important, this is what we have, and this is how you can access them, so that way they do not go underutilized.
I think that Yasmin has done a fantastic job of organizing stuff similar to this. And back in May, we had a kind of a mental health panel as well. And I mean, her and her team have done a fantastic job of helping kind of bring a lot of this to light. And so being able to work at a company that allows us the opportunity to do this and to kind of bring it forward is huge for a lot of us. I've been dealing with this for so long that I know that over time it's gotten easier for me to talk to about it. I have friends here at Workday where I know that when they've had some issues, they've come to me and said, hey, I need to talk about something. And being able to be able to have that opportunity to talk to those people, I think is huge, because I know I'm helping them. But at the same time, when I'm able to share my experience, it's helpful to myself.
I have a friend who says being a human being is hard, right? And you lay something like this on top of it, it's even harder, right? So making sure that those services are available, people know about them, take advantage of them. Anyone else want to chime in on advice?
Yeah, before I get started, I wanted to say I agree with Yasmin. Being here at Workday and having employee resource groups where you can share those culturally specific stressors in a safe environment has been really awesome. But in terms of my day-to-day lived experience, I actually talk about mental health and my mental state all the time. I have ways of talking about how I'm doing that I think are relatable to my team, and they get it. So, for example, if I'm showing up at work and I have difficulty paying attention, I say, hey, the lights are on, but nobody's home. And people get that because chances are they've had that experience too, regardless of whether or not they identify with having dealt with a mental illness of some sort in their life, or just like, yeah, I'm going to go work in a room today. But having, those little side quiet rooms where I can focus because I'm having difficulty paying attention has made my life and my job 1,000 times easier. And hopefully you're in a work environment that allows you the flexibility to get what you need from the workplace and deliver in the ways that you need to while still taking care of yourself. And I think that's crucial.
And I also just wanted to throw out that kind of a piece of advice for those of those of you who do not have mental health conditions. Just because you don't have a mental health condition doesn't mean that your own mental health isn't also important. And to make sure that you're taking care of that, even if it's not a condition, because if you don't take care of it, then sometimes that can develop into a condition. So, mental health is important for everyone, not just those of us who suffer from mental health conditions.
Yeah, well said. So maybe starting with Denise, can you share a way in which people who might want to educate themselves about mental health could do that, beyond what they might just see in the media?
Yeah, I think that taking that mental health first aid class was very valuable to me. And I think also for the others around me, because I'm able to identify and understand and also provide support. And I think that that's one of the most important things we talked about is sometimes people do want to talk about the mental health problems that they have or issues, and they don't have a safe space to do so. And so I think as a workmate, being someone who can develop emotional intelligence and apply that into my relationships as well as the Workday environment is going to be really important to help address some of these mental health problems and issues. And I really like the point that Tatiana made about not just saying, oh, I have a mental health issue. Your people aren't going to say that every day. And so I think having these types of conversations where people can develop emotional intelligence in that way is very, very important. Because it also helps me sometimes assess whether I'm having an issue or whether, is it going to be a good day today? Can I provide support to my other workmates or other people I work with if I'm myself not in the tip-top shape?
Yeah, I like your analogy earlier. It's like CPR, right? It's just another form of being able to help people. Adam, I know you had worked with the National Association for Mental Illness. What would you say?
I think one good way is everybody to join that, but a more realistic answer, I think, is that having the emotional intelligence to be available for people to talk to you about it, and then talking to them about it. If somebody who's going through a rough time is willing to talk to you, then they're willing to talk to you. And if you want to know more, then you ask questions. And I think anybody willing to talk about it is going to be excited at the opportunity to tell somebody how they're feeling and have somebody listen to what they have to say. I think another way, if anybody is interested in their own mental health, is, you can actually talk to your doctor and they can refer you to places because, they're not just there for your physical health, they're there for your overall health. And I think that's something that, they don't really advertise at the hospitals, but you can talk to your doctor about mental health and you'll learn more than what you started out with.
Yeah. I mean, I think your very simple advice there, ask someone how their day is going and really mean it, really want to know, like, what's going on with you today, right? And taking that time to listen. So sort of wrapping up, back to you, Yasmin, what advice would you have for companies who want to support their employees around mental health concerns?
Yeah, I definitely think, and just to reiterate, I probably alluded to it earlier, making sure that your current state of your culture and workplace environment is conducive to these conversations, that your people managers are trained to even recognize the most common forms of anxiety or depression amongst your team, and that when someone is experiencing a personal mental health experience that they need to take the day off, that they can come to you and say, hey, I can't come in, I need a mental health break. So making sure in some way your organization is addressing the commitment and the importance of this topic, making sure, again, as in workplace environment, you are creating opportunities to create a stigma-free workplace. So again, whether that's emulating how we are operating here at Workday and starting to offer these panels where our employees are volunteering to share their stories, through peer-to-peer support networks, employee resource groups, whatever they're called in your organization, but making them available and also making sure they're active, right? That people are moving this campaign forward and helping to create these open dialogues in order to reduce stigma. And then again, going back to the benefits piece, making sure that your benefits are addressing the needs of your employees. If you have the opportunity to have an employee interest survey in your organization, have one of those and see what your employees need and what they want, and making sure, again, that they are not only aware of the benefits, but making sure that they know how to access them so they are utilizing them and you are better able to say, we're making an impact and we are a stigma-free workplace.
Thank you. Well, thank you all for joining us today. As we heard from our panelists, we can all make a difference when it comes to mental health and the stigma surrounding it in society at large and at the workplace. Visit the Wakelet to find more resources available. And I want to thank Yasmin, Denise, Hannah, Adam, Tatiana, and Zach for joining us today. Thanks for joining another Workday Social Chat.